President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet on July 16, 2018, in Helsinki, Finland, the White House announced Thursday morning. The two leaders will discuss relations between the United States and Russia and a range of national security issues. Topics of discussion will also include the Ukraine and Syria, Trump said at the White House on Wednesday, and potentially Russian election meddling. It's the first formal summit between the two world leaders. The two men had their first face-to-face meeting at the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany, last July. They had a brief meeting in November at the APEC summit in Da Nang, Vietnam. Trump is also due to visit Belgium, England, and Scotland in mid-July. The meeting's announcement came as Trump took to Twitter to defend Russia on accusations of election interference and slam Hillary Clinton instead. Russia continues to say they had nothing to do with meddling in our election. Where is the DNC server, and why didn't shady James Comey and the now disgraced FBI agents taken closely examine it? Why isn't Hillary Russia being looked at? So many questions, so much corruption, the president wrote Thursday. His tweet appears to contradict what his Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said at a Senate hearing on Wednesday. Trump is sure to warn Putin that it is completely unacceptable to interfere in U.S. elections, Pompeo said. I'm confident that when the president meets with Vladimir Putin, he will make clear that meddling in our elections is completely unacceptable, Pompeo said during a Senate subcommittee hearing that covered a range of foreign policy challenges. U.S. intelligence agencies believe Moscow interfered in the 2016 election to the benefit of Trump. And Special Counsel Robert Mueller is investigating possible collusion between the Kremlin and the Trump campaign. Helsinki has been the site of other historic summits. In 1975, 35 nations met there in an attempt to improve relations between the communists and the West, signing the Helsinki Accords. In March 1997, then-President Bill Clinton and Russian President Boris Yeltsin met in Helsinki on security and economic issues. An aide to the Kremlin, Yuri Ushakov, was the first to say that the rumored summit between Trump and Putin would take place, calling it this summer's most important international event. U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, who was in Moscow to negotiate the summit details, set the bar low for the meeting, saying Wednesday, "I think the fact of the summit itself is deliverable." The senior White House official said that the president's critics have tried to make hay of the meeting with Putin to score political points. Bolton said that despite the noise, the president believes it would be better to directly communicate with Putin. Trump likewise said in the Oval Office on Wednesday, "I've said it from day one, getting along with Russia and with China and with everybody is a very good thing. It's good for the world, it's good for us, it's good for everybody. So we'll probably be meeting sometime around my trip to Europe." Bolton slapped down charges at his news conference that a meeting with Putin means there's a nexus between Russian election meddling at the U.S. president. The allegation is complete nonsense, he said, while admitting that it's not helpful to the two countries' relations. But what must guide his conduct is the pursuit of American national interest, Bolton said, explaining that the summit is something President Trump believes that he needs to do and will do regardless of political criticism at home. He described his own talks with Putin as wide-ranging in opening remarks. In response to questions, he acknowledged that the conversation, including the U.S. sanctions on Russia that Putin wants Trump to let up for the incursion into Crimea and attempts to disrupt the American presidential election. Share this article. Share election meddling came up during Bolton's press conference in relation to a statement he made prior to joining the Trump administration deriding Putin. "As I've said many times in Washington, and I'm now happy to say for the first time in Moscow, I don't really address what I've written in the past or what I've said on television. It's all out there. Right now I'm an advisor to President Trump," replied the former U.S. ambassador who flirted in 2015 with a presidential run. Bolton said, "It's his agenda that we're pursuing. And that's the agenda that I intend to advance." But we did indeed talk about Russian interference in the elections, and I expect it will be a subject of conversation between the two presidents as well." Russian diplomat Yuri Ushakov said prior to the avail, the talks with Bolton were constructive and businesslike. He also acknowledged that a conversation took place about election meddling. It was stated clearly by our side that the Russian state hasn't interfered with the U.S. domestic politics, moreover hasn't interfered in the 2016 election, the Putin aide said, according to the Associated Press. Over the weekend, Pompeo said a meeting between Trump and Putin would be helpful to the country's relations, in spite of a U.S. assessment that Russia is trying to meddle in the midterm elections. The top U.S. diplomat told CNN, "The Russians, unlike the Europeans, don't share our value set." However, he said a conversation with Russia is one worth having so that the two nations can try to put their relationship back on track. Whether it's the battlefield in Syria, the situation in Ukraine, the Russians' active measures, Pompeo said, "I am sure there are many topics that President Trump and President Putin will discuss, and each of them is important to trying to put the relationship back in place with a common set of understandings." Russia's interference in the 2016 election has been a sore spot for the president, who has campaign associates who've been probed in response to allegations that they were in on it. Trump has said at times that he believes Russia did do it only to come back, and claimed that he believes the Kremlin head's claims that the country didn't. The U.S. intelligence community has repeatedly warned that the November elections are ripe for additional attempts at disruption. Still, Trump has said he believes it would be better for the U.S. and sanctioned nation to have a dialogue. President Obama lost Crimea. Obama lost Crimea because President Putin didn't respect President Obama, didn't respect our country, and didn't respect Ukraine, Trump told Daily Mail. And other reporters on the North Lawn of the White House earlier this month. Trump implied that he believes that he will not have the same problems. Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats said this month, however, that it's his assessment that Russia is attempting to influence the midterm elections in the United States in November as well as divide the transatlantic alliance. These Russian actions are purposeful and premeditated, and they represent an all-out assault by Vladimir Putin on the rule of law, Western ideals and democratic norms, he told the Atlantic Council. As CIA director in January, Pompeo also concluded, "The Russians have been at this a long time, and I fully expect they'll continue to be at it. We will push back in a way that is sufficiently robust that the impact they have on our election won't be great," he told the BBC. In an interview published Tuesday, Pompeo, now the Secretary of State, told CNN that Trump agrees Russia interfering in our election is something they simply cannot do, and he does not believe the president would take any umbrage with that. But he said, to say there is a single issue that is caused there to not to be a warm relationship between the two countries is a misnomer. Washington-Moscow ties have been strained by the special counsel Russia probe into election meddling and alleged Trump campaign collusion. Trump added stress when he pulled out of the Obama-era Iran nuclear deal. The U.S. has also been street-faced in its condemnation of the Kremlin for a poisoning attack of a former Russian spy in the United Kingdom. The last Trump-Putin meeting was a brief encounter in November 2017 during an APEC leaders summit in Vietnam. But Pompeo said in an interview broadcast Saturday that he expects Bolton's visit to bear fruit in the form of a bilateral summit. "I think it's likely President Trump will be meeting with his counterpart in the not-too-distant future following that meeting," Pompeo said in an interview with conservative talk radio host Hugh Hewitt. Pompeo said the U.S. was trying to find places where we have overlapping interests with Russia, but protecting American interests where we do not. Just prior to the interview, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov emphasized that Moscow was ready for contacts with Washington and also said any agreement on a high-level meeting would be announced in advance of it. Trump and Putin discussed a face-to-face meeting in March when Trump called the Russian leader to congratulate him on his re-election. Both the White House and Kremlin revealed that Trump had invited Putin to visit the White House. That raised eyebrows among Democrats who have long suggested a cozy relationship between the two men led to Trump's election victory in 2016.